Hi, Scott. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you today. Yeah, sure. What we do is we inspire organizations to put well-being at the forefront of everything they do, thinking that your people, your highest value asset. And we deliver workshops, webinars, we do a lot of remote stuff. We do like revolutionary retreats and offsite conferences, audits, a multifaceted, holistic approach to well-being. Not always wanted to do. Actually, my background's actually in fashion for textiles. That's what I did my degree in, which was very creative. So I always kind of aspired back in the day to be a designer of some kind. And then through my own life experience, yeah, life took a bit of a different turn, and I could never really go back to that kind of field of work after I experienced what I did. I wanted to go into mental health to give something back, but also because I've had my own personal experience, I really understood mental health from such a different perspective. Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've got to walk our talk, haven't we? And it's incredibly important in organizations as leaders that we're role modeling those behaviors, because if our culture, or we're trying to build a culture of well-being, yet we can see our leaders aren't looking after their own well-being, that they're burning out, not sleeping, that's having a knock-on effect in terms of, how people perceive, but also, showing that the importance of well-being is not really being looked at properly. So it's, crucial that we look after our own well-being. And, leaders are even under even more pressure to, more susceptible to burnout, lots of high stress and pressure, which, can manifest in, not just mental health challenges, but also physical health challenges. So it's incredibly important. Well, Scott, if the last 2 years have taught us anything at all, it's that employee well-being is most definitely not a tick box exercise anymore. It's not just a nice thing to have, it's a crucial element of a happy, high-performing workforce. And as I mentioned before, your people are your highest value asset, and investing in their well-being, but also cultivating that culture of well-being within your organization should be at the top of the business agenda, especially kind of, moving into 2023 and beyond. So for the leaders out there that are listening and they might not be that convinced and need maybe a bit more evidence, or think that well-being is potentially a bit of a fluffy subject and it doesn't actually impact business that much. I want to give you some sort of stats actually, because I think, as leaders, we like to hear some stats. We need to be looking at ROI, to really firm those decisions. So the latest health and safety executive summary was actually published a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if have you had time to have a look at it. And this year's report, that's published, was for 21-22, and reports a staggering 36.8 million working days were lost in the UK due to work-related stress, depression, anxiety, and that's costing the UK economy £56 billion annually. So if that's not a big enough reason, then I don't know what is. But also, there's study after study now, but there was some really interesting research from MIT Sloan Review that revealed nearly 81% of workers face some form of burnout or mental health issue, and that 68% of employees said that their daily work had been interrupted by having these kind of challenges. So, it's very clear, all the research is pointing to it. But another stat is that actually 1 in 6 people, so, the leaders out there listening, 1 in 6 of your employees right now are experiencing a mental health challenge at work. And this can look like, chronic stress, burnout, exhaustion, and the physical health issues that manifest along with that: absenteeism, presenteeism, staff turnover, lower productivity, general, disengagement with work. It has, such a far-reaching impact. Definitely, and I was actually going to come on to that point. I don't know if you know this figure. I love figures because I think, we really need to hear data, because data actually drives decisions. So 85% of the global workforce is actually actively disengaged from work, and that's, productivity levels are falling really short. Hence why we've seen this year, 2022 has been like the rising, like you say, of the Great Resignation, and now we're kind of coming into this like quiet quitting movement. Gen Z and millennials aren't the only ones who are looking for more conscious employees. We all are. If COVID's taught us anything, it's that actually we are looking for something more than, the traditional workplace that has offered us before. And as employers and organizations, it's crucial that now we start to recognize how important it is, not just looking at, well-being as in mental or physical health. It's about fostering positive, compassionate cultures that not only support and enhance well-being, but actually they help people, they lay the foundations for people to reach potential, because actually this is what's going to push business forward in the future. Creativity and innovation is one of the founding things of businesses to move forward, particularly in economic downturns. And so if we don't have those foundations for people to flourish within our organizations, we're not going to be coming up with new ideas, we're not going to be innovating in the marketplace. We're going to be, dragging ourselves along and just making it through. And I think also we need to recognize, businesses, we can't rely on the government to really change things. I don't think, a business needs to kind of move into, a transitional point of like becoming sort of powerful catalyst for good in society. And there's been there's been a really good initiative, well, not good, an amazing initiative actually, that started called the Quantum Healthy Longevity Blueprint, which is a Lancet report, has just been recently launched, and their sole mission is to tackle like big real world problems within climate and health, but through business. Oh yeah, I mean there's so many benefits. I like to kind of call it returns on happiness, so like the positive impact of wellbeing cultures and organisations. You've got things like 4 times 4 increased revenue, 52% attract top talent, 33% higher productivity. That's pretty huge. 87% more engagement, 7 times more innovation, 40% higher customer satisfaction, and 21% more profitability. And Deloitte research also found that for every £1 invested in employee wellbeing interventions, employers see an average return of £5.30 in reduced absenteeism, presenteeism, staff turnover. So, there's huge things, but like I say, creativity and innovation goes up. Healthy organizations also outperforming their peers in terms of, people wanting to stay, much more likely to be identified as great places to work on Glassdoor and exceed their financial targets because people actually want to work there. Yeah. Yeah, because I think it can be a bit of a minefield. Where do you start? Like, what do you do? And I think, some organisations really get it right. Others, fall a bit short, and that's really because when you're cultivating a wellbeing culture, what you need to sort of first understand are all the factors that contribute to both individual and collective wellbeing in the workplace, and how your organization's culture and working environments are either promoting, supporting, and enhancing these. So, well-being is so much more, like I said, than just physical and mental health. It's really a multi-dimensional pursuit which encompasses all of our psychological needs. If you just look at, Maslow's hierarchy of need, what are those things that we actually need to fulfill our potential? It's psychological safety, it's rewards and recognition, it's financial well-being resources, it's creativity and innovation, it's teamwork, collaboration, feedback, leadership is huge. There's so many studies that show that positive leadership has a huge impact, but there's a lot of negative impacts of leadership that really do impact on well-being. So we really need to be kind of identifying all of those things and kind of breaking it down into pillars. So looking at employee well-being across sort of emotional, mental, physical, and financial, but then structuring it as in looking at our culture. So, what's our diversity and inclusion policy? Do our people feel like they belong here? Like, what are our values? Are we living our values? Because I see a lot of this actually in organisations, a misalignment of values. Organisations sort of say these values, but they're not actually living by them. And so that's been kind of really related to moral burnout of employees kind of, going against their own values and sort of being sort of fed, this is what we are, but actually it's not, there's no integrity. And I think that's a crucial factor. Psychological safety, which I mentioned before, if you don't feel safe to bring your ideas or to fail, that you're not going to do your best. You're going to kind of be living in fear the whole time of, putting a step out of place, and the effect that actually has on your well-being is huge. And then also like looking at job fit and alignment, does your job actually fit you? Have you got those skills? Are you kind of living up to your potential within that role? Are you kind of, coming out of your stretch zone so that you're being challenged, not too much, but not too little, so that you're kind of in that zone of genius almost in the middle. And then also, I mentioned before about leadership, but people and relationships are crucial factors. What's the communication like? Are you giving impactful feedback? What's teamwork, collaboration? Is your organisation siloed? How is kind of like interconnections with teams working? Is it very separated? So they're like crucial things to look at. And then again, about data. So it's really like evaluating, speaking to your people. A lot of things we see again is things being created, but we're actually not speaking to employees. So we're falling short because we don't actually know what the needs are of our people. So we're kind of imagining, oh yes, people need X, Y, Z, but actually the reality is that people generally need very different things than we think they do. I think there's some key questions to ask, which are things like, where do we currently excel in supporting our people, and where are we struggling? Where are we falling short? Like, have we got any knowledge gaps? What are the multi-generational well-being needs of our workforce? Gen Z and millennials compared to baby boomers are going to have different needs, and we need to make sure that we're catering for everybody. How have you kind of adapted and redesigned systems and practices since, COVID, hybrid, remote? Like how is that kind of working? Have they been looked at? Have they been addressed? Remember that remote and blended office-based cultures are going to have, very different needs and ways of thinking when it comes to, embedding well-being. And for remote cultures, need to be even more intentional about how you're going to kind of structure those, creating that culture of well-being. Oh yeah, 100%. And we see that a lot, in terms of, and I'm not knocking mental health first aiders, but from my perspective, I worked in mental health for 10 years. I actually don't think this is a good solution, because actually what's happening is it's a crisis point. We shouldn't be having to get to that crisis point. We should be designing cultures that are, people can have open and authentic conversations where our leaders are talking about their own mental health and well-being, so that it's, it's normalized. Like we're getting rid of stigma, and we're able to ask for support. I think the big thing is also, when somebody does come to you for support, make sure that you really do handle that well, that you listen to that person, but that you take actions to, making sure that you have got, tangible steps to support that person, because there's nothing worse than coming to somebody and saying, I'm in crisis, I need support. And then, the organisation not following through and helping that. And again, that's something that actually happens quite a lot, because, we might see lots of changes or read about it, or on LinkedIn think, oh, the world is changing a lot, but actually there is still a lot of stigma around mental health. And we really need to be actively like pushing through that and challenging that when we see it. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why it's so important as leaders that we talk about our own stuff. Everybody has mental health. It's not, we all suffer at times. And we need to kind of look at well-being as a spectrum too, that some days we have good days, other days we have bad days, and actually that's completely normal. And the more we can discuss that and show our own vulnerability, I think something that we've also really noticed that is very successful is to show vulnerability, and have that courage to open up about challenges, but also, talk about how you manage and support yourself. If you have got a condition or a challenge, that you're coming to work and you're succeeding, it's really important that we hear those things. It really sort of, again, normalizes the fact that everybody does struggle at times. Yeah, definitely. And, when you face with uncertainty, sharing struggles, challenges, successes, that really does build that resilience. And being able to reframe situations. We have a team meeting or your quarterly meeting and be like, wow, gosh, we've had a real tough time this quarter. This has been really difficult. This has been really difficult, but we've got through it in this way, and really reflect. I think human beings, we do really forget that, about looking back on what we've achieved, what we've got through personally, and reflecting on the challenges, but how we overcame them. And the more we can talk about that, we see different perspectives, and I think that really fosters a resilience within organisations. Hugely important. Hugely important. And it's trying to kind of, like, I think, shift again that sort of traditional narrative of like hierarchy, because that really does foster this kind of attitude of like, I can't speak up and I can't really talk about maybe my challenges because I'm not really seeing anybody above me saying it. And when yes, we might have to have hierarchy structures, but if we start to just humanize ourselves, even if we are the CEO, and we talk about our struggles, it shows that, everybody can talk. We're all the same, from the cleaner to the CEO, we're all human beings, aren't we? Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting point. And I kind of sort of call it like the shadow side of leadership is, what we all have a responsibility to do is to become, especially as leaders, is to become as self-aware as possible and to really build our emotional intelligence. So to learn, to really kind of be in tune with our own emotions, but understand how our emotions affect our team and how, that has like this sort of positive or negative effect. So the more kind of in tune with our emotions we can be, because we all get triggered. We're only humans, and if we're under more stress, we're more likely to get triggered. So in terms of leadership, you can be really derailed, when say you have a propensity when you get stressed to become quite controlling and micromanaging. You've got to think about how that's impacting your team. And a lot of people don't like to kind of look at those kind of aspects of themselves. But I think as a leader, the more you can do that and be more conscious about how you're showing up and, being able to check in with yourself, the better leader you're going to be, in a huge impact your people in a positive way. And, recognizing that actually we all get derailed, like that's a normal part of being human. We all have, good sides, we all have bad sides. It depends, how we are on that day when we get out of bed. But the more we can, take responsibility and ownership of that, I think that's a really, really crucial thing, that if we all were a little bit more kind of humble, that and we showed that, we acknowledged when we do maybe behave in a little bit of kind of an out way, we own up to it and we say sorry, and we take responsibility. I think that's the way forward. And a lot of leaders, they, especially younger leaders, they end up in those positions because they've been really good at their job, but they're not necessarily good people, because they haven't necessarily had that training. So again, it's about, if we're putting people in leadership roles as an organization, what training are we giving them? Have they got the right mindset and skills that they need to lead well and impact their people positively? Because these are key factors in cultivating healthy and inclusive working environments. Well, that's a great question. Well, what I'd like to see firstly, and this is really, really difficult because I think the first thing that tends to get cut in terms of budgets around well-being, but what I'd really like to kind of advise leaders is to really prioritize, well-being budgets, because if you're cutting that and you're not looking after your people, that is really going to impact the success of your business. I think long term, your brand reputation, it will be, really affected by that. I think for the wellness revolution, really helping organizations look at different avenues for well-being, creativity is a huge thing. And when we're actually being more creative, maybe not in the traditional sense of painting and drawing, we're actually using a different part of our brain, which makes us more resilient to stress. So how can we factor in more time to be creative with our team? What tech can we use to encourage more creativity? We have like a winning from home program, which is kind of all based on things that can really help people, work better in terms of, looking at things like perfectionism is a huge thing that really affects so many people, particularly I would say in the last year with the response to, as a trauma response to COVID. It's like a way of kind of like managing stress about being perfect. And I think leaders have a big thing with that too. So, teaching and educating people around these things, how they can work better, not just performing better, feeling better. And we're really looking at, experience design, like helping organizations to design winning programs that are going to like leave a legacy long after we've gone. That's really what our mission is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I'd love to come back on, Scott. Yeah, anytime.